Okay, here we go. We have done quite a bit of disassembly here, and there are some very interesting lessons. Now, I left my garage door open. It's very bright, and usually that's backlit and makes the videos a little bit rougher, but we had some issues with darkness with the first one. So, first of all, let's start with the electric starter, which is where I started, and there's some interesting stuff here. Now, the electric starter is in two pieces. It's got a switch to the starter mechanism, and the starter mechanism connects to the flywheel. Now, this is actually a motor. You get power. This is a switch for power that puts power to a little motor inside that turns a gear that gets to this guy. This is your flywheel, and if you can see in there, you can see that copper wire in there. Now, there's two different sides. There's magnets on one side and copper wire on the other, and when that turns, let me see if I can get a better shot there. When that turns, that creates the electric charge that'll go straight to the spark plug. So that's a really good look at that. And then you can see that this actually turns right here. And the gears inside here, right there, connect to that gear which runs the starter. Pretty cool. Now, coming up on the other side, we have some interesting stuff. Now, a couple of notes on working with this way. You can see how I have my tools laid out, and because it's more complicated of a machine, I had to pull out some of my other tools, but really I'm only using about 4 different sockets. Now, the key thing here is this. I'm using 2 different types of sockets, so I have a reducer right here that goes to 1/4-inch drive sockets, because I have 1/4, 3/8, and 1/2-inch drive sockets. But when you get the ones that are the right size, keep them in one place so you can always go back to them. If you throw them back in the box, you end up with that and you can't find anything. It's a good rule about that. Also, when you take something out, keep the screws with the parts. So this screw right here goes right here. Sorry, this right here. See how the screws are still in there? It's a good way to keep that. When you go to put it back together, you don't have the screw, the thing won't go together, and you've got a big lawn ornament instead of a working machine. So let's go to the front. You notice I had to take out the chute as well as some of the housings. This is just cotter pin stuff. We'll get that. I'll get to that later. Now I took a wire. This is the chute housing, and I took apart the housing here for the belts. I'm going to talk about the belts in a second because that's how they do the motion. And then I took apart the arm here, the arm that controls the chute. Now let's get into here. Here's our animal. Now, I said earlier this is the air filter, and I am wrong. Our professor, Mr. Manusos, will laugh at me over that because this is actually your head cover. Under here are the 2 valves that actually run the engine. And if I pull this back, you can see those 2 valves. This would be considered a head. That's a head gasket. And those are the valves that go up and down into the cylinder here. Right? Now, they are sparked by the spark plug that goes in there. And then we can look at the ignition system over here. You can see here's the bulb where it'll pull fuel down this line here right into the chamber. So that's how that primes that. Now, what's interesting about this particular model is they have what's called a key. How can this, there it is, good. How can this be a key? Well, what it does is it goes to these guys right here and completes the electrical connection to let it go. If you pull this, it's actually gapped in there, and those 2 don't connect, and the whole ignition system won't work. You'll never get it to start. And one of the interesting things in the manual, it says don't turn it because it'll break. Well, yeah, it's like a wedge that goes in there. It's an interesting little part with this model. So here's our exhaust system. It's an exhaust manifold. It looks just like any other muffler. It's well tightened in there. Here's how we get spark plug into there, down in through here. You'll notice in comparison to the other engine, everything has metal plates. There's also quite a bit of housing that I had to take apart, as well as this housing right here. And again, notice that I'm keeping all the screws with the parts as I go. Sorry, dropped one. Keep your screws with that. These are the 4 screws that put the head cover back on. This is the housing that went over the muffler. A lot of this stuff is designed to give layers of protection, so if you touch it you won't get burned because this gets really, really hot. You can tell by the corrosion. And this is all from heat more than anything else. Also, there's a lot of additional plastic covers because this deals with snow, which deals with water, and you want to keep this stuff protected. So, one of the interesting things, I was looking at the belts, and this is an interesting part. Notice, you have two arm cranks, handles, that when you press down, they move along cables down to the belts. One is for drive, the other one is for the auger. So you have here, this turns, this turns here. Now when neither one of those are in there, not much of anything turns. It'll just sit there at idle. When I want to go to drive, you'll notice this down here, this connects to the wheels. When you pull this, that'll move slightly. So that will engage the drive according to the gears that I choose up here. Now if I want to engage the auger, which is all this mechanism up here, remember there's two of them. There's the auger up front and then the thrower in the back that scoops it and throws it out to shoot. Because I was concerned that this is really loose. You can see you could actually pull this off. Well, it's loose, so it's not engaged. Unlike the chipper, that is instantaneous transmission of motor to power. This one, you need to put it in gear to get that transmission to go. So when I pull the lever, it tightens up and everything tightens up. And that will actually engage the front auger. When you pull the both of them, and I can't do that with three hands because I'm holding the phone to record this, you'll see this belt here. This belt looks in good shape. This belt here is a little bit worn. I might order a replacement for that at some point. The other thing you'll notice, this is really dirty. So I'm going to spend some time cleaning this to get this a little bit more shipshape because it's just been sitting for a long time because it hasn't been used very often. I was looking for a fuel filter. The oil reservoir, this is just a housing. So there's nothing there, and it goes into the fuel here. This system's fine. This is empty. I'm not going to worry about draining it because it's empty. It is another one of those plastic units. It is metal here, but the unit itself inside is plastic lined, so there's no corrosion in there. I took if you go in here, there's a little fill. Let's see if we can get a look inside. I gotta find my flashlight. There we go. Ooh, there is some corrosion in there. See all that mucky stuff in there? That's not going to be good for our engine. So we're probably I take that back. We are going to drain that because that looks pretty nasty. So we're going to drain that and flush that, and then fill that in with some fresh gas. Now the oil fill is here, a very long dipstick that goes down to here, but there's also an oil check on this side right here. If you pull this bunch of oil squirts out, why do I know that? Because it happened to me. But in order to empty it for the oil change, we're going to loosen this guy here, which you tip it up this way, it'll come out into one spot and you can empty it into a reservoir. Obviously there's too much stuff on my table at the moment, so I will clear the table and prop up the front of that, pop that thing off, and then empty the oil. But at this point, I need a new starter before I do anything, because I need to put one of these in here. I also need a new spark plug, and I need to drain the fuel, and then put it all back together. The gasket for the head cover looks brand new, so that I'm just going to go ahead and reseal that and put that back together. But this is a pretty good indication, pretty good example of multiple things going on with one internal combustion engine. This one actually does transport this mechanism from one place to the other to do work, and it fits all the things that we've been talking about. So that's it. Thank you.